awesome.
How you doing?
Yeah.
This movie gives like new meaning to the word joystick.
Oh yeah.
So, gotta ask you, the characters Oz and Tess. What was your inspiration for those two, for the main characters?
Well, there's a lot of altered states in there. There's definitely a lot of The Fly. I haven't watched that. I think that, there's a dynamic between the characters in The Fly that I find really fascinating, of this super genius guy that's, obviously has a lot more swagger than Oz does, because he's Jeff Goldblum and he has, infinite swagger. But just somebody that two people that very quickly find a connection that is, sort of inherently deep and that you buy pretty quickly. So that was what I was trying for.
Well, Chase, who played Oz, who's actually originally born in Coral Springs, Florida, you worked with on Beyond the Gates.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities between Beyond the Gates and your film Sequence Break. The game. There's also it's a very personable story. There's a lot to do with love. There's a lot of similarities. Did you take away anything from your experience with Beyond the Gates going into Sequence Break?
To be honest, not really. I mean, I feel like, with Beyond the Gates, I guess the main thing is that it's ultimately every good horror story, I think, has to be about people first, and about relationships. And then you care about them, and so when terrible things happen to them, then you go with them on the journey. And I think that's why Beyond the Gates works really well, and I really wanted to, with this, not just make it a movie about like a killer arcade game, to have there be an anchor in two people's lives that are being totally fucked with, and how do they deal with it.
Yeah, you didn't want a video game chasing after Emilio Estevez.
But although that is awesome, a Bishop of Battle.
So, were there any very difficult sequences to shoot? Anything where noise became a problem? Any outdoor?
I mean, yeah, pro tip for indie filmmakers: always do sound right. Always spend money on sound and get sound right, because that can totally make or break a movie. With sound, fortunately we had this amazing sound guy, Victor Boozy, and he, totally saved us on some occasions. I mean, the rooftop scene, we decided to film during rush hour in downtown Los Angeles, just super smart, with 4 helicopters going around. It's a dialogue-heavy scene. I wanted to slit my wrist, but again, it's just get good people working on your team that can help out with that stuff. I think as far as difficult things to shoot, special effects is always really tough, but it's really just about allowing time and patience for that sort of stuff to come together. And so we really wanted to allow a lot of breathing room for for a special effects team, Josh and Sierra, to really do their thing, and I think they totally nailed it.
And when it came to casting, Fabian, was Fabian and Chase originally, did you have them in mind at first, or were you looking other directions?
Well, Chase was definitely my first choice. He was the first guy I went to. I just totally had him in mind for it, and fortunately he said yes, because I think he's amazing. With Fabi, he had worked with her on John Dies at the End.
Right.
And so when we were trying to cast Tess, I threw it out to him. I said, is there anybody you can think of? He said, why don't you bring in Fabi? So we saw a few people read, and she came in and read it and nailed it. And the main thing for me was I wanted Oz and Tess to have really good chemistry, that you could go, okay, yes, these are two people that immediately would meet and they're in love. It's right there. And I think because they've been such good, close, actual friends in real life for a long time, that they, it hit that for me.
They have great chemistry in the film. It feels like a very real relationship between the two. My favorite scene is when they're sitting in the bar towards early on in the film, and they're just having that conversation, and it feels like an actual real conversation that I've had with people. I absolutely love the dialogue in that scene. I want to give the audience a chance to ask you some questions, and this gentleman right here raising his hand.
About the rooftop scene, what with the whole monologue about getting out of your head and everything, and would that based on something that you feel?
Oh, sure. When I'm having any kind of a serious conversation, and I'm sure when my wife's sitting here in the audience, and I'm sure when I first started, dating her, it was the same thing of thinking the whole time while I'm talking, I am screwing this up. So, I find that's true, like in general, when you make anything, you know, it's you know, in terms of art, I think that if you get out of your own way, that's when the really cool stuff can happen. So I think that's kind of sort of where that comes from.
Speaking of your wife, she has a part in this movie as well.
She does. She makes a cameo as the so Fabi wasn't available on the day that we did the stuff where she's climbing out of the black sludge. And so with my wife, so she's gonna be the sun devil. So thank you, Jordan.
Can you tell us a little bit about the bin shopping for that scene?
Yeah, well, that was pretty hysterical. So we were trying to go around and find a barrel large enough to fit her in, so that she could be fully submerged and then climb out of it. So me, my producer Lyle, and Jordan went to like a barrel factory in somewhere in the outskirts of LA, and we went in and we said, hey, this is really weird, but we need to find a barrel big enough to stick my wife into. And I'm really glad that we had her there with us, because I feel like that would have been even weirder if a couple of guys were walking around going like, yeah, I don't know, she's gonna fit all the way, it needs to be bigger.
And anyone who knows me knows if I was the sales guy in that scene, I'd be going, so you can put her all at once, you can slice her up, and I'd have a serious look on my face when I did it. Who else has a question for Graham? Raise your hand. There you go, this young lady over here.
I have an effects question.
Yeah.
So, when you were doing the oil, what did you use? And also for the scenes where you had them like pushing their hands up against the screens, did you use like latex for that, or?
Yeah, a couple of things. For the oil, I don't know what the solution was, but it was some kind of, I know it was black food coloring with some kind of like, she might know, with like, I think it was probably like ultra slime, which is clear, and then you just put black food coloring in it, makes it all black. And then there was another liquid that they used, which wasn't ultra slime, but I think it was just some sort of a thickened solution that again they just put black dye in. For the screen, there were two different screens. The first one, this shiny one, when it pushes out, yeah, that was some kind of like a thick latex that they just put on it. And then later on, when Oz and Tess are climbing out of it, it was just black fabric.
Who else has a question? Yes.
This one's weirdly specific, but as a bartender, I've never heard of Tomcat. Is that like real?
It's a totally real thing.
Are you like that?
I totally, it's great. It's
Okay.
like mezcal and gin. It's
Okay.
really good. Bar Hill Reserve, who sponsored the movies.
Okay.
By the way, this young lady, Jenny, she's a massive fan. She's been like waiting for the screening and
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Jenny.
huge fan. Thanks. I just put her on the spot. Who else has a question?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Not like greatest of all time, but like what's one of your favorite scary movies of all time? Or horror movies of all time?
That is a great question. It fluctuates between probably Evil Dead 2 and original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like really hard to beat. It's really hard to beat.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else has a question? Yes, go ahead.
I want to know what exactly was the moment you were like, I have to write a movie about the video game.
That's a good question. So many years ago, this was like, maybe 10 plus years ago, I was reading online about an urban legend about a video game called Polybius. And it's this urban legend about an arcade game. Supposedly, it was in the 80s, and they people would play it, and they would have hallucinations or seizures, and maybe die, and there's all this other stuff about like, and there were men in black that would come, and it was all mind control government thing. And so anyway, I thought at the time, I went, this is really cool, like a killer video game, like what a neat idea. And then for years, I would try to write something, and nothing would ever like work. Like I just couldn't get anything to feel right. And then it wasn't until a couple years ago when I revisited Videodrome for the first time in a while, which if you haven't seen Videodrome, it's in my opinion, it's Cronenberg's masterpiece. It's amazing. But what I realized two things when I watched it. I went, this doesn't need to be like some weird slasher movie where like a video game is killing people. It needs to be about, body horror and about mind, somebody's mind melting away, and then it needs to be about people. It needs to be about a relationship. And so then those things combined, and I got a melting skull.
Well, for the last question, instead of them asking you, you're gonna ask an audience member a question, and they're gonna raise their hand, a question about the film, and if the person gets it right, they're gonna get a gift bag.
Okay, and there's some awesome stuff in that gift bag. In fact, Jordan, if you know the answer, just answer it. So we can take it. All right, trying to think of something good here. You already took the Tomcat one. I was going to ask what you was thinking. Okay.
Raise your hand for the
What is the name of the arcade shop? I saw it in the back. In the back first.
Jerry's.
I'll give it to you. Jerry's Arcade Spot. There you go. Good job. Thank you.
We want to thank Graham Skipper for taking part in the Q&A and for coming out.
Thank you guys so much. This has been an amazing experience, and you guys were an awesome audience. Thank you.
Tell all your friends about